Why did Roman soldiers wear crests and feathers on their helmets? Have you ever wondered if this was merely an aesthetic detail or if there was a deeper reason behind this choice? The Roman army left nothing to chance. Every piece of armor, every symbol, and every ornament had a strategic purpose, and helmets with crests were no exception. These crests and feathers went far beyond appearance. They aided in identification on the battlefield, ensuring that soldiers knew exactly whom to follow amidst the chaos of combat. They were also symbols of hierarchy and command, distinguishing officers from common legionaries. Additionally, they played a powerful psychological role, intimidating enemies and making the mere sight of Roman soldiers in formation enough to shake the confidence of adversaries. But the influence of these helmets did not stop there. In ceremonies and parades, the crests became even more elaborate, carrying the prestige and glory of the Roman army, showing the people and enemies that Rome was unshakable. What seemed like just a visual detail was, in fact, one of the secrets of Roman domination. If you want to understand how a simple helmet helped the Roman Empire become one of the most feared forces in history, stay until the end, because we will reveal the true hidden purpose behind the crests and feathers of Roman helmets. Before we start exploring the next topic, take a moment to check if you are subscribed to the channel, because what comes next is a series of amazing videos that will help you better understand the history of Rome and how it can inspire your personal journey. Don't miss any content. In the heat of battle, with hundreds or even thousands of soldiers fighting at the same time, confusion reigned supreme. The air was thick with dust, war cries echoed from all sides, the sound of clashing swords was deafening. And the troops needed to move quickly and in coordination to maintain their formation. Amidst this chaos, a significant problem arose: how to ensure that soldiers knew exactly where to go and whom to follow. If each warrior acted on their own, the Roman legion would quickly become disorganized and be doomed to defeat. To prevent this, the Romans developed a simple yet extremely effective solution: crest helmets. At the top of the helmet, a strip of horse mannae or colorful feathers helped identify commanders on the battlefield. This seemingly simple detail made a huge difference, as it allowed soldiers to see their leaders even amidst the confusion. But not just any soldier wore a crest helmet. It was reserved for officers, each with a different style to indicate their position in the military hierarchy. The centurions, who were like captains responsible for commanding a group of about 80 soldiers, wore a crest positioned horizontally, crossing the helmet from side to side. In contrast, tribunes and generals, who were above centurions in the hierarchy, wore vertical crests, clearly indicating their superior position. This identification was essential for maintaining discipline and organization during battle. Even if a soldier was surrounded by the enemy or separated from their unit, they only needed to look around to locate the shine of the crests and know where to run. Thus, crest helmets prevented soldiers from getting lost in the midst of combat and ensured that orders were followed precisely. To better understand the importance of this system, think of a football game. The coach needs to give instructions to the players, but if he were dressed like anyone else in the stands, no one would recognize him in the crowd. In the Roman army, leaders needed to stand out in the same way, and crest helmets were the perfect way to ensure that visibility. Without this differentiation, the legion would become a disorganized group, with each soldier acting on their own, which would mean total failure of the military strategy. The Romans knew that organization was one of their greatest weapons, and that's why they invested so much in symbols of leadership. The crest helmet was not just a beautiful accessory, but a fundamental piece for the functioning of the legions. It allowed the army to move as a single organism, following its leaders with precision and efficiency. This was one of the reasons why Rome was able to conquer so many territories and maintain its empire for centuries. In the Roman army, discipline and hierarchy were the keys to victory. Each soldier had a well-defined role, and no one could act on their own. To maintain this impeccable organization, it was essential that everyone knew exactly who was in command. But with thousands of warriors on the battlefield, How could one ensure that each soldier recognized their superiors immediately? The answer lay in the helmet. Unlike common soldiers, who wore simple, unadorned helmets, officers and centurions wore helmets with elaborate crests. These crests, made of horsehair or colorful feathers, stood out in the crowd, making the leaders visible even from a distance. With a simple glance, a soldier could know who was in control and from whom they should take orders. This differentiation was not just a matter of appearance, but a vital necessity to maintain order within the legions. In the heat of battle, when dust filled the air and the sounds of swords and screams filled the environment, quickly identifying leaders could mean the difference between success and failure. Without this visual reference, soldiers could become lost, disrupt formations, and end up vulnerable to the enemy. The crests were not all the same. The position and shape of the crest indicated the officer's rank. Centurions, who commanded a group of about 80 soldiers, wore horizontal crests that crossed the helmet from side to side. In contrast, tribunes and generals wore vertical crests, which stood out even more, symbolizing their superior authority. This variation helped establish a clear hierarchy and allowed soldiers to know not only who a leader was, but also their level of command. Beyond the battlefield, this visual distinction was also essential during training and marches. The Roman army was known for its strict discipline, and daily exercises ensured that each soldier knew exactly their role. During these activities, the helmets with crests helped organize the ranks, ensuring that everyone was in the right place and followed orders correctly. In this way, soldiers became a true war machine, highly efficient and ready to face any challenge. Centurions, in particular, played a crucial role within the legions. They not only led soldiers in combat but were also responsible for training, discipline, and the execution of superior orders. To be a centurion, it was not enough to have strength and courage; experience, leadership, and respect within the army were necessary. The helmet with crest symbolized this status, showing that the man had earned his position through merit and was fit to command. Unlike common soldiers, who could be recruited from peasants and ordinary citizens, officers usually had years of military service and a history of victorious battles. Their crests not only highlighted their leadership role but also demonstrated the authority they had earned over time. It was a visible sign that this man was someone to be followed, respected, and obeyed without question. In large military formations, such as the cohort and the century, maintaining discipline and organization was fundamental. If soldiers spread out or lost sight of their commanders, the legion could become an easy target for enemy attacks. The shine of the manes or the colorful feathers atop the helmets helped guide the troops, allowing them to react quickly to any order, even amidst the chaos of combat. The Roman military hierarchy was extremely rigid, and any sign of insubordination could result in severe punishments. The helmets with crests also served as a constant reminder of this command structure. They made it clear that there was an order to be followed and that each soldier had a specific role within the legion. This organization was one of the reasons why the Roman army became one of the most successful in history. In addition to their practical importance, the helmets with crests also had symbolic value. They represented the experience and bravery of the officers, distinguishing them from common soldiers. For many legionaries, achieving the rank of centurion and earning the right to wear a crest on their helmet was a dream. These helmets were also used in ceremonies and important events. During military parades and displays, the officers marched with their crests prominently visible, showcasing the pride and prestige of their position. For the soldiers and the populace, this image reinforced the greatness of the Roman army. The organization of the Roman army was one of its greatest assets. While other civilizations relied on brute strength and the number of warriors, Rome stood out for its impeccable structure, battle tactics, and ability to act as a single coordinated organism. The helmet with crest was an essential piece in this system, ensuring that the chain of command was respected and that each soldier knew exactly whom to follow. Without this visual distinction, it would have been much more difficult to maintain control over such a large and efficient army. In battles where every second mattered, quickly locating a leader could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The Romans understood this, which is why they placed such importance on the use of helmets with crests. The helmets with crests were more than mere adornments. They were symbols of power, leadership, and respect within the legions. With their help, the Romans managed to maintain impeccable order, ensuring that their armies remained invincible for centuries. This was the true strength of the Roman army: organization, discipline, and the certainty that each soldier knew exactly whom to follow. So, did you know that the helmets with crests and feathers worn by Roman soldiers were not just an aesthetic detail, but an essential piece in warfare? Throughout history, each civilization developed its own models of helmets, but the Roman army took this innovation to another level. How did these helmets stand out, and what was their true impact on the battlefield? Leave your comment and tell us, did you already know this story? What do you think of these strategies used by the Romans? Your opinion is very important. If you found the topic interesting, share it and help spread this knowledge even further. We want to know what you think. In the Roman army, nothing was done haphazardly. Each soldier had a precise place to stand, every formation had a purpose, and each movement was planned to ensure that all fought together like a great war machine. Amidst the clamor of swords, the cries of warriors, and the dust raised by horses, how could one ensure that no one got lost or did something wrong? The answer lay in discipline and coordination. The Romans used extremely organized military formations, such as the cohort and the century. In these formations, each soldier occupied a precise space and moved according to the commands of the commander. For this to work, everyone needed to clearly see who was in command. That's where the helmets with crests came in. Commanders and centurions wore helmets with tall, colorful crests so that soldiers could easily identify them. If a soldier looked around and saw his leader's crest, he knew exactly where he should be and where he should go. This was essential to avoid confusion and maintain the unity of the army. Imagine a vast battlefield, with thousands of soldiers fighting at the same time. Dust rises, the sound of swords echoes, and it's hard to hear anything. If soldiers relied solely on spoken commands, everything would descend into chaos. By seeing the crest shining in the sun, they knew they were still positioned correctly and could follow their leaders without hesitation. This visual coordination was one of the greatest advantages of the Roman army. While enemy armies often fought in a disorganized manner, the Romans moved as one body. If the commander raised his sword and pointed forward, everyone knew it was time to advance. If he fell back, the troops did the same without delay. And all of this happened because soldiers knew exactly where their leaders were, thanks to the helmets with crests. It wasn't just in battles that this organization made a difference. During training and marches, the visibility of the crests helped maintain discipline. Soldiers trained exhaustively to react quickly to the visual signals of their commanders, ensuring that when the time came to fight for real, they were prepared to act without mistakes. The helmets with crests were also very useful when the Romans needed to change strategy quickly. In combat, everything can change in a matter of seconds. If a commander spotted a gap in the enemy's defense, he could give a new command, and the soldiers, seeing his crest move, would understand the order and react immediately. This provided a huge advantage against less organized armies. Another important factor was that the crest not only indicated who was in command, but also showed the direction the group should move. If a commander ran to the right, the soldiers around him saw the crest moving and knew they needed to follow him. This prevented groups from separating and formations from breaking. Even those who were farther away could see the crests moving above the crowd and understand what was happening. This made the Roman army incredibly agile. Everyone knew where to go and how to react without needing to wait for verbal commands. The Romans understood that a well-coordinated army was much stronger than a group of disorganized warriors. They developed tactics that ensured their soldiers always knew whom they were following. The helmet with crest was one of the most important elements of this strategy. This organization was one of the reasons the Roman army achieved so many victories throughout history. They did not rely solely on brute strength or the number of soldiers, but rather on discipline and superior strategies. While enemies fought in a disorderly fashion, the Romans moved like a great war machine, always knowing exactly where to go. The helmet with crest was much more than a mere ornament. It was a symbol of discipline, order, and efficiency of the Roman army. Without it, maintaining organization amidst the chaos of battle would be nearly impossible. Thanks to this seemingly simple detail, the Romans managed to stay united and coordinated. This ensured victories and expanding their empire. Thus, the helmets with crests became one of the greatest symbols of Roman power. Always visible on the battlefield, they guided the soldiers, ensured that formations remained firm, and helped transform the Romans into the most organized and feared army of antiquity. In the Roman army, it was not enough to be strong or to know how to fight well. To gain respect and rise in the hierarchy, a soldier needed to demonstrate courage, discipline, and intelligence. One of the most visible ways to show this status was through the helmet with a crest. The more important the soldier was, the more impressive his helmet. The helmets of common soldiers did not have crests, or, when they did, they were quite simple. In contrast, officers and centurions wore large and eye-catching crests made of horsehair or colorful feathers. This indicated that they were respected leaders within the legion and had earned this position through hard work and dedication. But it was not just the size of the crest that made a difference. The material used also said a lot about the warrior's prestige. While the crests of common soldiers could be in neutral colors, the officers wore vibrant colors like red and white, standing out from the rest. Some high-ranking commanders even had helmets decorated with golden or silver details, reflecting their importance within the army. In addition to being a symbol of authority, the crest helped inspire the soldiers. When a warrior saw a commander wearing an imposing helmet, he knew that man had fought many battles and deserved to be followed. This created a sense of respect and admiration within the legions. A centurion, for example, did not earn his position overnight. He needed to prove his worth in combat, show that he could lead other men, and maintain discipline. Once promoted, he received a helmet with a horizontal crest, distinguishing him from the others. This simple visual detail made all the difference on the battlefield and within the military hierarchy. Younger soldiers looked up to these leaders and thought, if I work hard and fight well, one day I might wear a helmet like that. This encouraged discipline and loyalty within the legions. Another interesting detail is that often, the more ornate helmets were not only worn in battles. In ceremonies and parades, officers donned their finest armor and placed even more luxurious crests, reinforcing their authority before the soldiers and the Roman people. It was a way to show that they were not just warriors, but also important figures within the empire. This respect for the crest helmet extended beyond the army. When the Romans marched through the cities, citizens could clearly see who the commanders and leaders of the legions were. This made the population admire these warriors even more, recognizing their prestige and their fundamental role in the defense of the empire. Over time, the use of the crest helmet became a true symbol of success within the army. Those who wore it were not just any soldier, but someone who had earned a prominent place among the most feared warriors of the ancient world. Thus, the crest helmets were not just a piece of armor, but a mark of prestige, respect, and authority. They ensured that everyone knew exactly who was in command and encouraged soldiers to dedicate themselves even more to achieve leadership positions. The Romans knew that in battle, it was not just the strength of arms that decided who would win. Fear was a weapon as powerful as a sharp sword. And they knew how to use it very well. One of the most effective ways to scare their enemies even before the fight began was with their impressive helmets with crests, which made the soldiers appear taller, stronger, and much more threatening. The battlefield was a chaotic place. Shouts, dust, the sound of swords clashing, the banging of shields, and the weight of uncertainty could easily destabilize any warrior. The Romans, however, were prepared for this scenario. They organized themselves impeccably, with their ranks aligned and each soldier occupying their position as if they were pieces of a large puzzle. The helmet with crest was not just an ornament, it was part of this grand visual strategy that helped ensure victory. The enemy armies knew that facing Rome was a gigantic challenge. Even before the combat began, they could see the legions approaching from afar, marching in perfect sync. Dust rose from their firm steps, and the reflection of the sun on their shiny armor and helmets created an intimidating spectacle. The tall, bright red crests gave the impression that they were facing warriors who came directly from the gods of war. The extra height provided by the crests made the soldiers appear larger and more imposing. Many of the enemies, upon seeing this colossal army advancing towards them, began to feel a tightness in their chests. A warrior who enters battle with fear is already half defeated. The Romans knew this and used intimidation as one of their main trump cards. After all, a frightened opponent does not fight with the same strength and determination. In addition to their intimidating appearance, the Romans also used colors strategically. Red was one of the most common colors on the crests of the helmets. This striking hue symbolized blood, war, and courage. Roman helmets symbolized the soldiers' courage, showing that they did not fear battle. Their fierce appearance had a strong psychological impact on enemies, reinforcing their willingness to fight and die for the empire. The Roman soldiers also stood out for the noise they produced. When they marched, their reinforced sandals struck the ground with force, creating a rhythmic and constant sound. The clashing of armor, the raising of shields, and the war cries echoing in the air created a terrifying atmosphere. The combined effect of this visual and auditory strategy could be devastating for opponents. Many warriors preferred to flee rather than face an army that seemed like an unstoppable war machine. The impeccable organization of the legions was another factor that increased the impact of intimidation. While barbarian armies tended to fight in a disordered manner, the Romans advanced as if they were one. Each soldier knew exactly where to stand, how to react, and when to attack. The helmets with crests helped in communication among the soldiers, ensuring that the commander's orders were seen and followed instantly. This allowed the Romans to perform better, even against numerically superior opponents. The most experienced enemies tried to ignore the visual impact and focus on the fight, but that was not so easy. When they saw the Romans approaching, many recalled stories of invincible legions that conquered lands and destroyed entire armies. Fear was not just a fleeting feeling, it grew within each warrior who knew their chances of surviving against such an organized army were slim. For the Romans, combat did not begin merely when the first sword was drawn. The battle started the moment the enemy spotted the marching army, when their hearts raced and their hands began to sweat. Intimidation was a form of fighting, and the crested helmets were a key element in this strategy. The Roman Empire understood that a demoralized army became weak, and thus they made it a point to appear invincible even before the first blow was struck. Even the centurions, who were the leaders of the troops, wore different crests to stand out. While most crests were positioned vertically, the centurions wore horizontal crests. This not only showcased their command position but also made them more visible to their own soldiers in the heat of battle. A centurion needed to be easily found so that their orders could be followed without hesitation. In ceremonies and military parades, the crested helmets gained even more prominence. On these occasions, they were adorned with vibrant colors and luxurious details, becoming true symbols of Rome's power. The soldiers marched proudly, showing that they belonged to one of the most feared armies in history. The grandeur of the Roman troop became even more evident, reinforcing the reputation of an unbeatable army. The psychological effect of the crested helmets was so strong that, in some wars, certain peoples tried to mimic the Roman style to appear more intimidating. However, only the true soldiers of Rome knew how to use this strategy perfectly. Discipline, training, and tradition made the Roman legions unique. It was not enough to look strong, one had to be truly strong. The crested helmets were much more than a beautiful accessory. They were part of a military tradition that combined intelligence, strategy, and psychological warfare. Ancient Rome did not conquer its empire solely by the strength of arms, but also by the impact it had on its enemies even before the first blow was struck. Fear was a powerful ally, and the Romans knew how to wield it like no one else. Even centuries later, the crested helmets remain one of the most iconic symbols of the Roman army. When one thinks of a Roman soldier, the image of a warrior in shining armor and an imposing helmet quickly comes to mind. This was the mark of an army that made history and used every detail to its advantage to conquer the world. The Romans did not just win battles, they won them even before they began. And their crested helmets, with all their grandeur, helped ensure that advantage. The enemies did not see just an ordinary army. They saw warriors prepared for anything, ready to fight to the last drop of blood. And when an army instills fear just by its presence, victory is already halfway there. Before we move on to the next topic, I noticed you haven't liked this video yet. This is super important as it helps YouTube promote our content to more people, allowing us to continue bringing you more information to help you. So, don't waste time, leave your like here, it's free and makes all the difference. Thanks. The crested helmets were not only used on the battlefield. They also played an essential role in ceremonies, parades, and important events of the Roman army. On these occasions, these helmets transformed into symbols of honor, status, and power, showcasing the grandeur of the legions. The Romans understood that appearance had a profound impact on how the army was perceived, and the crested helmets helped reinforce the idea that the legions were disciplined, organized, and invincible. Military celebrations were grand events in Rome, and soldiers always had a prominent role. During parades and public ceremonies, the legionaries wore their best-kept armor, polished to reflect the sunlight. However, the crested helmet was the element that attracted the most attention. On these occasions, the crests were made of colorful feathers, dyed manes, and even precious metals. The taller and more flamboyant the crest, the greater the prestige of the soldier wearing it. Among all the ceremonies, the triumph ceremony was the most impressive. When a Roman general returned from a great victory, Rome welcomed him with a spectacular parade. The streets were crowded, the people cheered, and the legions marched in impeccable formation, carrying spoils of war and demonstrating their strength. The crested helmets were part of this spectacle, creating a vision of power and grandeur, reinforcing Rome's image as a glorious empire. Crested helmets were not only worn by common soldiers. High-ranking officers and generals had even more luxurious versions, often adorned with gold and precious stones. These details served not only for ostentation but also to clearly show who was in command. A Roman general needed to be easily identified, and his helmet with a flamboyant crest made it clear to all his position and importance. In addition to military parades, crested helmets were used in religious rituals and sacred ceremonies. The Romans believed that the gods protected their soldiers and that war was a divine mission. Before a great battle, ceremonies were held to seek blessings, and the soldiers donned their finest armor, including their most impressive helmets. This reinforced the connection between war, spirituality, and the destiny of the empire. The ceremonial use of helmets also helped strengthen the sense of belonging and identity within the army. For the soldiers, wearing that crested helmet was more than just a formality. It was a reminder that they were part of something much larger, a tradition that spanned centuries, and an army that had conquered the known world. They were not just warriors but guardians of Rome's legacy. In military training, crested helmets also had their role. When new recruits were accepted into the legion, a ceremony was held to mark this important moment. Veteran officers, with their imposing red crests, were present to inspire the new soldiers and show what they could become in the future. For the young legionaries, that moment symbolized the beginning of a journey of discipline, learning, and glory. Even in moments of mourning, crested helmets held special significance. When a great general or commander passed away, a military funeral was organized in his honor. The soldiers marched in silence, wearing their crested helmets as a sign of respect. Often, the deceased's own helmet was placed on his tomb, representing his deeds, leadership, and the legacy he left for future generations. The celebrations organized by the emperor were also moments when the crested helmet stood out. During these festivities, soldiers and officers paraded in the imperial palace, wearing their finest armor and showcasing their ornate helmets. This was not merely a matter of aesthetics, but rather a way to remind the people and the authorities that the army was the backbone of the empire and that the peace of Rome depended on the strength and discipline of its warriors. The visual power of the crested helmets was so striking that, even among the conquered peoples, they became a symbol of authority. In distant provinces, Roman governors and commanders wore crested helmets to reinforce their status and show that they represented the absolute power of the empire. When the inhabitants of these regions saw a Roman soldier with an imposing crest, they knew they were facing the might of Rome. Even within the army, the shape and color of the crests had specific meanings. While centurions wore horizontal crests, tribunes and other senior officers wore vertical crests. This differentiation was essential not only to maintain visible hierarchy but also to ensure that orders were followed correctly during ceremonies and military events. The Romans understood that visual symbols were powerful. The imposing appearance of the Roman army during ceremonies helped keep troop morale high and reminded everyone, both allies and enemies, of the strength of the empire. The ceremonial use of crested helmets was not just a matter of tradition, but an effective tool of military propaganda. The tradition of crested helmets in ceremonies continued for centuries. Even as the Roman army underwent changes and new combat tactics were introduced, the symbolism of the helmets remained. They continued to serve as a reminder of the glorious past of the empire and the discipline that made the legions unbeatable. In the end, crested helmets were much more than a mere piece of uniform. They were symbols of courage, discipline, and tradition. Whether in battle or in ceremonies, they represented the strength and greatness of Rome. Every soldier who wore one knew that they carried not just a military accessory, but a piece of the history of the greatest empire in the world. The Roman soldiers were known for their discipline, strength, and impeccable organization, but there was a special detail that made them even more impressive: the crest helmet. This helmet was not just a piece of metal to protect the warriors' heads. It was a true symbol of power, respect, and authority within the Roman army. Over the centuries, this piece became a trademark of the Roman legions. Anyone who saw a Roman army marching with shiny helmets and imposing crests immediately understood that those men represented one of the most powerful empires in history. The helmets were not all the same. The style of the crest indicated the soldier's position in the military hierarchy. While common legionaries wore simple helmets, centurions and officers donned colorful and flashy crests to stand out. The crest helmet had several essential functions on the battlefield. It helped soldiers identify their leaders even amidst the confusion, where dust, shouts, and the clash of swords could turn everything into a true chaos. With a simple glance, the legionaries knew where to go and who was in command. This detail was crucial for the legions to maintain their famous organization. In addition to identification, the crest helmets also served to intimidate enemies. A Roman soldier, with his impeccable armor and a red or black crest waving in the wind, appeared larger and more imposing than he actually was. Often, just the sight of a Roman army in formation was enough to shake the morale of adversaries, causing them to hesitate even before the fight began. But these helmets were not only worn in battles. In ceremonies and parades, they became even more decorated, symbolizing the glory and victory of Rome. When a general returned triumphant from a great conquest, his troops marched through the city streets, wearing shiny helmets with luxurious crests. For the Roman people, this image reinforced the idea that their army was unbeatable and that the empire would continue to grow. Moreover, the crest helmets were a tool of respect and discipline within the army itself. A young and inexperienced soldier looked up to the veterans with their imposing crests and knew that those men had earned their place through years of battles and dedicated service. This encouraged newcomers to train harder and prove their worth within the legion. Over time, the helmet with crest became a true icon of Roman military power. It represented the strength, discipline, and glory of the legions that conquered much of the world. Wherever a Roman army marched, those crested helmets served as a reminder that Rome was invincible. Ultimately, the helmet with crest was not just an accessory. It was a living symbol of Rome's greatness, an element that helped maintain the order, discipline, and imposing presence of the most powerful army of antiquity. If there were an object capable of summarizing the strength of the legions, that object would certainly be the helmet with crest. Now that you have come this far, you have realized that the Roman helmets with crest and feathers were much more than mere war accessories. Every detail of the Roman legion was meticulously thought out to ensure discipline, efficiency, and superiority on the battlefield. From the quick identification of commanders to the imposing presence of soldiers before their enemies, these crests were essential. Throughout history, strategy has always been a differentiator for great armies, and the Roman Empire knew how to use every element to its advantage. Soldiers not only fought with strength, but also with intelligence, which included how they presented themselves. Hierarchy was clear at first glance, troop coordination occurred with precision, and intimidation began even before the first blow was struck. All of this proves that to win battles, it is not enough to have sharp weapons, one must use the mind as the greatest tool of war. If you thought the helmets were merely decorative items, you now understand how they represented power, respect, and strategy. Each feather, each crest, and each shape had a profound meaning within the army. These traditions have perpetuated over the centuries, and the symbols of Rome continue to be a reference for military strategies and even for modern culture. But this is just one piece of the enormous puzzle of Roman warfare. If you want to continue exploring the secrets of the empire, discover more about its combat tactics, its soldiers, and the weapons that shaped history, don't leave without subscribing to the channel. We have much more content coming your way, and you won't want to miss any detail of this epic journey. Thank you for watching this far. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep receiving the upcoming content. Until the next video.